if you try to go, how to get the worksheet first. So if you go on to our website, most of you probably already done that, and you may have our website on your favorites. So if you go to our website and if you see few things on the top, if you go on to the what you need and the financial resources section, and if you within that you'll see many items. One of the items is the compensation guidelines, learn more. And here you'll see our worksheet and few other items on this page itself. We have the full-time clergy compensation worksheet and the part-time clergy compensation worksheet. So I'll start with the full-time, and then of course we'll go with the part-time also. So you download that and you start from there. And keep in mind there are a lot of things I'll be talking about. You don't have to take much of the notes in the sense that we have a lot of those items already included within the worksheets. In last year, you may be seeing 4 tabs. This year we condensed it into 3 tabs, and almost all the entries you'll be doing on the first page. And second page, you'll do the compensation entry, the 4 lines in these 4 lines. But other than that, almost all the entries you'll be doing it on this section, so that it minimizes where you have to put all the different information. But a lot of the information you'll see on the 3rd tab, that's full-time compensation chart and definitions. Here it's mostly no data entry. The items are do your explanations and some of the formulas that we used. If you're trying to see where they are, they're all explained in this section. To start with, in the past, we used to have the credited service in this section L3. Now that's also on the first page on the entry form. I'll show that to you also. And we have few items within this chart. It's very important for you to understand. We have different position categories, curate assist, assistant associate, vicar rector, priest in charge, interim rector, rectory provided, and same thing, rectory not provided. So we'll go through these two with examples, and if you have your uniqueness within your facility, please ask those questions. We'll go through that too. When we talk about on the right, a few other columns. First one is the cash stipend base. These are minimums, and cash stipend base times the years of credited service. This will be adjusted once you put in the years of credited service. I'll show you that on the first page. And actually, in the entry form, we have that in this section V8. This is required entry. It's in red. Years of credited service. And this is the item that you'll get from the CPG statements, the pension statement. The clergy would have that. And also, if you were not filling out this for the first year, this is 1 year more than last year. So for the people who are doing it for the first year, for a new clergy, this is where you need their pension statement. If it's not the first year, you'll get it from the previous year. You add 1 more year to that.
And Gary, if I could just interrupt you for 1 second. Is anybody else besides Beverly still having trouble pulling up the document? And Beverly, how are you doing? Do you have it pulled up now? You can unmute yourself.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I am so lost.
Are you able to make it onto our diocesan website?
Yes.
Okay. So then up across the top, did you see the menu choices up there? The one that says what you need?
Yes.
Click on that.
Yep.
And if you scroll down, you'll see one that says financial resources.
Okay.
Click on that.
Yep.
And then it should pull up the screen that Gary's showing right now, the grid. Do you have that?
Nope. I have the choices. I have compensation guidelines, benefits, DIT.
So you're not seeing the same grid that Gary's showing on the screen right now?
No.
What happens if you click on compensation guidelines?
I have standing commission on clerical compensation.
Okay. And what are your other choices there?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the right.
That's what we're looking at. So if you look at on the right, do you see
There's
one that says
explanation and introductory letter? There's clergy work unit explanation, full-time clergy compensation report.
right? That's it. Full-time clergy compensation report. That's where we are.
Okay, I have it now.
Okay. And you can either do that, or for the time being, if it's easier, you can just follow along the screen with what Gary's doing. Whichever's easier for you. Okay. All right, go ahead, Gary. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you. So here you look at the years of credited service. The second column, cash stipend base times the credited service. So once you put in the credited service on the entry form, it will change these numbers also. And the third column is about the column B, housing equity or housing subsidy. And you'll see how that works also. These are the minimums, the housing equity, 2,500, negotiated for interim. That's 2,500, that's the minimum. You could change that amount to higher, but cannot be lower. Same thing with the housing subsidy, 18,000 when the rectory is not provided. And that also, that's the minimum, it could be more. Self-Employment Act, that's the SECA. And this is the items that you guys may be familiar with. The lay employees, it will be called FICA. And usually an employee gets the employer portion, that is 7.65%, and an employee portion that they pay, that's another 7.65%. And here, with regard to clergies, we do not pay for FICA, we call it SECA. We give the 7.65, the employer portion, directly to the clergies, and in their annual returns, they reconcile that with the federal government. So they need the employer portion, and that's the 7.65% that we pay to the clergy. And they should be, of course, paying that to the government on a quarterly basis, or from the withholdings, from the regular federal withholdings, because there is no FICA withholdings that we do. So they should maybe ask for increased federal withholdings, or pay it on a quarterly estimated tax basis. It's usually easier to pay it easier to pay it through the withholdings, and that makes it easier, so they don't have any penalties for under withholding at the year end. Next column is column D, the pension assessment. This is the formula that gives you how we come up with the calculation on the actual report. The next column, professional expenses. Keep in mind the 4,500. This is the minimum, and this is recommended, and up to their actual expenses. And sometimes it could be lower if their actual expenses are lower. The continuing education, 1,075, and then the insurance premium. It could be from different plans. They could opt into the church plan, or they could have their own maybe, or from their spouse. So you'll see it on the benefit premium section, but it could be from 15,063 to 44,619. And some other items already explained within these definitions and assumptions, and comp chart and definitions. So the key thing you'll see is the credited service here. Work unit, this comes in when we talk about part-time clergies, and it talks about pension assessment and some of the calculation and some of the details. Now we'll go through the benefit premium section. Here there are a few items. First question is, if the clergy has their own benefits from their spouse or themselves from something else, then they may not need our church plan benefits, or they may not take it. We may just they may want us to reimburse for their out-of-pocket expenses for the pension, for the benefit insurance plans they have from the spouse or other things. then we may pay them for a different amount. But if that is the case, we should explain that on the line 9, where you see the yellow section here. And also, if not, we should give them the proper insurance amount. And here, these amounts are annual. To enter the annual amounts, even though we gave you the monthly and the annual rates for 2022 and 2023, we should enter the annual amount. So for a clergy, say the benefit amount is for group life insurance. The question is, are they 70 or below or 70 or above? So if they're 70 or below, it's 50,000. So the annual rate for clergy is $228. So here you should put in $228. So instead of typing it in, usually it's direct to actually refer to it, because when you type it in, you may make a mistake and put a different amount there. So instead, you can put actually show that amount. So here I'll put in $228. And for the dental cost, say you could have the single, two party, husband and wife, or if they have kids, it's a three or more party. So here we'll go with an example of a two party. Say it's 1,222, and for the health insurance, same, two adults, 27,048. So that gives the total insurance cost of 28,498 for the 2022. For the 2023, for the 50,000 benefits, the 2023 annual rate, $228. And here the two party for the 2028, and health insurance the same way, two party for 2023. So you'll see both life insurance and dental are same. Sometimes they become same, but sometimes they do change. So health insurance this year it's changed. So 28,498 is the cost for the total insurance cost in 2022, and 29,626.80 is the total cost for 2023. And you'll see this moving on to the next page when we go there. Next, we'll go to the entry form. If participants could mute themselves unless they have a question, that would make it more clearer. Thank you. So here, this form, you'll see this is the section that's in red that needs to be completed. And the name of the church, so it's name of the church, it's like Trinity, say it's Trinity Cathedral. Next one is the town, say Trenton. Name of the clergy, years of pension credit. This is, like I said, from the CPG. They'll be receiving now, and that's the required entry. And that actually has a lot of impact on the calculations. And date.
I have a question on the credible years of credit. Do you have?
Yes.
Are they round numbers, or can they have decimals?
They could have decimals. Yes, they could have decimals. Doesn't have to be round numbers. It's 5 years and 3 months. So you can put in that in the decimal format.
Okay, thank you.
And the date appointed, appointed to the present position, years in present position, date of diaconal ordination, the name of the person completing the form. This is important. As we, if we have any questions, we could talk to that person. And the title of that person, the contact information, the telephone number, and the email address. And of course, before I forget, keep in mind this form is due. Once you complete the whole form, send it to sccc at diocesesofnewjersey.org by March 1st, 2023. So that information is right on the top. and this is the Standing Commission on Clerical Compensation. So then also they need to get these forms, and we use it for many purposes, including it affects your pension, clergy's pension information also.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question. I plugged in my numbers. I'm sorry. I'm John Gundy at St. Mark's in Plainfield. I plugged in I basically completed the form, and it
Wow.
comes up with a salary amount. We have it at 37 rector in charge. Does that 37 include the required 5% COLA, or do I have to add that 5% to that 37?
Here, that once you put in the
Yeah,
pension credit,
right.
that will actually calculate that from the COLA. And once you put in the 22 information, that also looks at it and calculates it from there. So
Okay,
here
so
you
right,
don't change that.
right.
It is your
So the 37,400, for instance, includes the 5% COLA.
yes.
Okay.
No, actually, it doesn't. So the 37,500, and it might help, Gary, if you go ahead and enter something in the years of pension credited service.
Okay. So I will, for example, I will include 5 years in there.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So as soon as he does that, you see that it changes the
Right.
years of credited service minimum. What you do for in order to incorporate the COLA is when you enter in the 2022 cash stipend, it will calculate the COLA on top of the 2022 cash stipend, and then it will, and you'll see when Gary, finishes further along, what it would do is it will compare
No.
the cash stipend times the 5%, or plus
Okay.
the 5%. It will compare that against the years of credited service minimum, and it will take the higher of the two.
Okay. Would you put that number in? Let me see what it looks like.
Sure. So scroll down if you could, Gary. Scroll down into the table below. So you see now for 2023 in the projection,
Right.
it takes the cash stipend plus the COLA increase, and it compares it against the base stipend based on years of credited service, and
Right.
it will do all of the calculations and base the compensation on the higher of those two numbers.
Got you. But go back up. But that number still is a 42. See what I mean?
Well, that 42 now. So Gary, change the years of credited service. Make it 10.
Make it 10. Make it 10.99. 10.99. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
and
so
I'll put in. Go ahead.
So what was the cash stipend for 2022? What was your cash stipend?
good question. I don't know.
Yeah, see, that's what you got to
Yeah.
get, and then it will take the COLA on top of that cash stipend number,
Okay.
compare it against the 47, and the higher of those two numbers is what you need to use.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah.
48,000 as last year's pay. Change to 48,000. Now you'll see the next will go up.
So you see in that, in column B over there where it says the cash stipend with the COLA increase, it's the 48,000 plus 5%.
Okay. Then that's 50,000 for it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
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 That's how it works.
You're way further in line. So okay. Thank you. Good questions.
Where do you get the information for the years of service?
I
Yes.
called church pension and they gave it to me.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's where you get your clergy person should have it. Okay. They get a report every year. They're actually required to file a report every year, but then they get a statement every year from Church Pension Group, and included in that statement is their years of credited service. But
That go to them personally?
Well, yeah, either that or you can call if they don't have if they don't have it, if they don't have that statement, you can, as John just said he did, you can call, as long as you're the administrator on the account for your church, you can
Okay.
call church pension group and ask them.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
I have a question, Phyllis.
Hmm.
Um, is it possible that the church pension people could be persuaded to copy the church on that letter?
That one you could address that question to Pat Hawkins. She's our
Okay.
benefits administrator, and she works most closely with Church Pension Group. I don't know if there's other private information on that letter that needs to be kept confidential to the clergy person. I'm not sure.
Is your office near hers?
We're both working from home. I'm in Titusville. She's in Ewing.
Okay. No
But
worries. Thank you.
yeah, she is P Hawkins. So that's PHAWKINS at diocesefnj.org.
Phyllis,
Uh-huh.
hi, it's Maggie. I think actually Pat has that information also, I believe.
Yeah, she may.
Yeah.
Yeah, she may. But actually, again, it's if it's something, your clergy person should be the first person you should be able to go to. They should have this information, and it's not out of line for you to ask them for it.
I have, but clergy are concentrating on church matters and can't necessarily put their hands on that paperwork as easily.
Right, and some I do recognize that it's clergy people are people just like everybody else. So there's some of them for whom this is just a slam dunk. I get this letter, I give the information to my treasurer, and then other ones who aren't in that in that kind of routine. So again, there are other options if your clergy person can't lay their hands on that letter easily. Then you could either contact her. I'm just trying to keep
I got it.
135 congregations from calling Pat Hawkins.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you. Yes, and I don't want to call her either. So if the treasurers were CC'd on that, it would just make life a lot easier. But anyway, okay. Thank you for answering the question. I won't hold up the meeting.
Okay, no problem.
The seeker expense, that's just 7.65 times the stipend, right? Not the 15.3. I mean, we were only playing the employer part, correct?
Yeah, I would say, let's go ahead and let Gary go through the rest of his presentation, because I think the 7.65% is the correct percentage, but it's on other things besides the cash stipend. And I think you'll hear that when Gary does his presentation.
Okay.
But Gary, I do see that John Patterson has his hand up, so you might want to see what he wants.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, hi. We come in this one every year, and that is our rector requests that part of her salary become housing. So when I record it in our books, I don't have the 47,000. It's less than that because part of that 47,000 is going to housing. And her W-2 is going to show it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 100% sure how to handle that issue.
How is it going to affect pension?
Yeah.
So when you're, so we'll start off with the scenario in which you're dealing with a cash housing allowance. Okay.
Right.
So if you have, and I'll just throw out some numbers to make it easier. If you have someone who is getting, let's just say the initial breakdown was $50,000 in cash stipend and $20,000 in cash housing allowance,
right,
for a total of $70,000. But the clergy person is actually, spending $30,000 on housing, and once their IRS designated housing allowance, and I should correct my terminology so I can be clear. This is the reason we call our cash housing portion a housing subsidy, not a housing allowance, because we want to differentiate it from the IRS terminology of housing allowance. So if their cash housing subsidy is $20,000 and their cash stipend is $50,000 for a total of $70,000, but for IRS purposes, they want a housing allowance of $30,000, which brings their cash, the cash portion to $40,000.
Right.
What you report to the IRS and the breakdown that we use for this form do not need to be related to each other.
Okay.
Okay. So you can dissociate that part of it from them. Okay. And you can, whatever it is that they're requesting as a housing allowance for IRS purposes, you can designate it that way. And then on their W-2 form, they would show the $40,000 as their cash stipend rather than $50,000 that's shown on this report.
Okay. So those two numbers can be completely different. They're completely different reports. We just deal with them differently.
Right. Yep. You could do that. Now, the one other thing I would say along with that is that if you know, from prior experience that your clergy person is, is designating that amount as their housing allowance, you can do it so that this report matches it. There's nothing wrong with that. The ramification that you need to remember is that the 5% COLA or the COLA increase, whatever percentage it happens to be, only applies to the cash stipend, not the housing allowance. So whatever you report on this form as a cash stipend, that is the amount that the 5% COLA will be applied to, not the cash stipend plus the housing allowance. So that's the differentiation, there when you're looking at the ramifications of what you report as a cash stipend. So, just to round out that example that I just used, if you and your clergy person decided, okay, we're going to adjust this form to match what's happening with the IRS, that would mean that the cash stipend would be reduced to $40,000, the housing subsidy would be $30,000, and then in subsequent years, the COLA would only be applied to the $40,000, not the $50,000 as it had been before. So that's the ramification that you need to be aware of when you're talking through these numbers.
So if we have a housing allowance for the 22 cash stipend amount, we would only put the stipend, not the stipend plus the housing.
Right. You would go from whatever. So this was a form that you should have filled out last year for the 2022 compensation. And so whatever it is that you actually paid your clergy person as cash stipend, okay, according to the report, the projection that you did last year, that's what you would report on this form moving forward. Unless you do, if you do decide to make an adjustment, if there is a difference there, if there's a difference between the cash stipend and housing allowance that you projected last year, and the cash stipend and housing subsidy that you actually paid in 2022, then, what we're looking for is the actual figures that you paid, but you also need to be aware of, the ramifications of changing that cash stipend breakdown.
But if you put the cash stipend in, say the stipend was only say there was a 40,000 housing and like a $28,000 stipend. If you put 28,000 in the 22 amount, it's going to look like it's below the minimum.
Right. Well, that's the other thing that you have to bear in mind. We can't be going below minimums, which is, again, part of the reason why, if you go from the cash stipend as you actually projected it, last year. Okay. So let's go for, use numbers, because I always find it easier to just, think of things in terms of the numbers. In the example that I used, if in 2022, last year when you did this form, if you said that your cash stipend was $50,000 and your housing subsidy was $20,000, then that's what you should report here. And, you know, as I said, the amount that the amount that you use for IRS purposes doesn't have to have any relevance to these numbers. So in order for us to be consistent year on year, you know, as you're doing these projections, the amounts that so in other words, these amounts that we're seeing in front of us here, if this was you know, for real, what you were doing, next year, when you go to do your clergy compensation report, you should be reporting these same numbers.
So Phyllis, what it really comes down to is we really ought to keep those two sets of numbers separate, because if I force this to be the number I actually report to the IRS, I'll be below minimums.
Correct.
So I should just use the number that we based it on and not worry about what I'm telling the IRS.
Right. And
Thank
again, yep, the only other thing that I would say there is if for any reason, you know, let's say these were your numbers, you know, 50,000 and 20,000, and we'll keep separate what you're you know, reporting to the IRS. But for any reason, there was a change mid-year, and all of a sudden, you know, that maybe there was, you know, you decided to give a merit raise or something like that, you know, in the middle of the year, and your cash stipend number is now 55,000 instead of 50,000.
Yeah.
Then we would want your actual number. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay. And I
But
see
the
Linda.
actual COLA raise is only based on the cash amount, not the housing plus cash.
Correct.
Because the total stipend is the housing. You're just separating a part out, but you only give it on the cash.
Right. Well, the reason that we separate the housing subsidy out of it is because that's treated differently for income tax purposes.
Right. Okay.
Right. So that's why we do make a differentiation, and we state our minimums based on, you know, the minimum housing subsidy is $18,000 a year. So we do have a minimum for that. And so that's why we separate them that way. But Linda, I see you've got your hand up. Can you unmute yourself?
My question is, we switched treasurers. We had a treasurer last year, and I've just taken over this year. How do I get a copy of this report so I know what was on the report?
Well, I would hope since it's an electronic form, it might be saved somewhere.
I don't know. He didn't tell me about it.
Well, we could check it. Remind me, you're with Laurel Springs, right?
Right.
So I mean, we could check our records. John Sturgis, who had spoken before and joined us a little bit late. Hi, John. Is our chair of our standing commission on clerical compensation. So maybe John can go back and look and see if the report for Holy Family in Laurel Springs was actually filed, in which case we have a copy of it. If not, you would have to check with your prior treasurer or, you know, see if it's saved somewhere else in your files.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll check.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Can you add St. Peter Spotswood to that? Because same thing happened there. And I don't have a copy of that. And I'm not sure I'm going to get cooperation.
Okay, great. Did you got that, John?
Thank you.
If you responded, John, you're on mute, so I didn't hear you, but we'll hope that you heard St. Peter Spotswood as well.
I did. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right, back to you, Gary.
Okay, thank you. So here I'll go through a couple of examples, one with the directory provided and one is with the directory not provided. And I will show you how the compensation report differs from on each situation. So here, let's say we'll take an example, and as you go through, as I'm going through, you could fill out your worksheet also. So here, say last year was a $40,000 compensation. And you'll see this number changed with the year of subcredited service of 5, and then the housing equity it's saying like minimum here it has to be 2,500. So we'll put in that's for the 2020. That's for 2023. So here we'll say last year we'll put in as 2,000, and 2023 we'll put minimum 2,500. And since rectory is not provided, we'll put the fair market value of the rectory for 2022. And
Yeah, that's
say
with rectory is provided. That's the column that you're in right now. Yeah.
rectory is provided.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So here the fair value of the rental, fair rental value would be, say, we'll put in 17,000 for 2022, and we'll put in 18,000 for the 2023. And then utility cost 3,500, and we'll put in about 44. Professional expenses, keep in mind, minimum we have a 4,500. So 22 for the year 2022, we'll say 4,000. And you should put the actual amount, but say it's 4,000, and we'll put in 4,500 for the minimum for 2023. Continuing education, say last for 2022, we'll put 900. 2023, we'll put 1,075. And the insurance amount is coming from the annual insurance premium that's coming from the benefit worksheet. You'll see the 28,000 and the 29,000 and change that's showing up in this form automatically since you filled it out in the benefit premium section. And that's the only other item not coming from
I
the
do
sheet.
see that John's got his hand raised.
Hi, John. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry to keep butting in, but on professional expenses, we've adopted the policy of escrowing professional expense that the rector doesn't spend for future sabbatical. Do you want the actual professional expense, or do you want the number that shows up on our financial statement, which will be 4,500?
Right. So if you're considering what we want for 2022 is the actual amount spent. So since you're accruing that amount to be spent in a future year, I would treat it as an amount spent and report the full amount.
Okay, so we report 4,500.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Phyllis?
Yeah, Larry.
On that train of thought, did I read that the continuing education expense, if not used in the calendar year, accrues up to 5 years, and that is mandated by the diocese? Please correct me.
That's not mandated by the diocese. You can do that if you want to, if that's your policy within your own congregation, that's fine, but that is not mandated by the diocese.
All right. I read it somewhere in a recent manual of business practices for the Episcopal Church for the Diocese of New Jersey. So you may want to look at that. I'll try to find it and send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, and it may very well be in there that it can be done. I've just never I've never understood it to be mandated.
Okay, I'll run that down and just clarify that, because we've been a column to accrue the difference, and I just wanted to be sure of that.
Sure. Maggie?
Yeah, I actually, with regard to that, I really feel like I've read that somewhere in our canons, and we do that as well. We accrue that. So that was just a comment on that. I have just one other quick question on the utilities. We have always used our budgeted number for the utilities number for that. It always matches what we have budgeted for the year. Is that satisfactory?
What we're looking for for the 2022 report is your actual amount.
You do want actual.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking for actuals for for the current year that we're just ending. When you're doing the report for that
Yeah.
year, we are looking for the actual.
Okay.
But you know,
Yeah.
for the next year, you know, obviously we are looking for what you're budgeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hmm.
Now the last two lines, for the other compensation in a bonus or something else, you can put in those amounts here also if there is any. Okay, and save those are zeros for now. And so the compensation report for 2022 is showing up right here. And keep in mind that since this is correctly provided, that you'll see the total compensation to be 91,757. And here, keep in mind the fair value of the rental, 17,000, the 18,000, and sorry, 17,000 for 2022, and 2,000 that we used here for housing equity is not part of that 91,757. So I mean, it's starting with the cash stipend of 40,000, the SICA, the housing equity, pension, professional expenses, continuing education. These are all and the insurance premium. All these numbers are coming from the above worksheet, and it's totaling up to 91,757. So to truly see the total compensation, you should really add for your own their own purposes. You could add the 2,000 and the 17,000 to that 91,757, and see the total expenses. The total true compensation is about $112,000.
Isn't the housing equity in that 2,000? I mean, I see the 2,000 in your sheet, so I thought that was included in the total of 91,757.
I think you meant to say the fair rental value and the utilities.
Okay.
Utilities.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Fair rental value and the utilities. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out.
And I see Linda's has had her hand up.
Go ahead, Linda.
Yes, wondering about the utilities. Are they the utilities of the actual rental? Because we rent our rectory out. We don't. Carmen has his own house.
Right. So this wouldn't even apply. If he has his own house, then you would be paying him a cash housing allowance. This is only when you're actually providing the rectory to your clergy person.
Okay. So if we rent it, we don't put any utilities in.
You'll see. Now, Gary will go through the next example will go through will be for a clergy person who's actually having a paid cash housing allowance, not living in a rectory.
Okay. And then you're also going to be doing for a part-time clergy, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I did see that Ingrid had a question that she posted in the chat because we do have some congregations who are affiliated, which means that they have, you know, basically, depending upon their arrangements, one church that's handling the payroll for the clergy person, with the other church, you know, making contributions towards that cost. And so, yeah, Ingrid, you would provide one report for the affiliation. Okay. You don't have to try to split everything between the two different churches. You file one report for the affiliated churches. In your case, Pemberton and Lumberton. They would file one report together with all of the totals on one sheet. You don't have to, you know, try to split it between the two different churches. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gary.
And the next, you'll see the 2023 worksheet. It's also, since you already filled in all those information, it shows here for the 2023, the next year's. Here you'll see it's taking the compensation greater of the two. That's the 42,000 or the 42,314. So it's taking the 42,314. No housing subsidy, the SICA, the housing equity, and pension adjustment, the pension assessment, professional expenses, continuing education, and insurance premium, totaling up to 97,510 as our total compensation. Same thing, we should add the fair rental value of 18,000 we put in on the top, and annual utilities we put in 4,000. So if you add those numbers to this, you'll see about 119,000 or 100, almost 120,000 into this actual compensation. That's since fair rental value and utilities are not included in here, and you can see 97,000 as the compensation.
I have a question, Phyllis. I'm from Holy Trinity in South River, and it just occurred to me when you made that other statement. We have a priest that is he's using our rectory, but he's actually getting paid Father Arian from another church. Do I have to include anything for that rectory? I mean, or how is that done?
Yeah, so
another church be filling one of these out for him and include the value of the rectory in their report?
I would say you could handle that either one of two ways. Yours is a somewhat unique situation. And so either you could fill out a part-time clergy compensation report and include the value, the fair rental value of the rectory and the utilities as, you know, the components of the compensation that you're paying for the priest, as well as any share of the, you know, the pension and seeker responsibility that you might have, and have the other congregation report, you know, the cash portion of his compensation, as well as their share of Sika and pension. Or you could get together with the treasurer from the other congregation and file one report together. Again, sort of like the affiliated congregations, you know, do. You could file one report, one full-time clergy compensation report for him, with a notation that it's, you know, that it's split between the two churches. That might be one where maybe you and Gary and I should have some conversation offline, because yours is a pretty unique situation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I saw there was one other thing that came up in the chat. Our rector is retiring at the end of June 2023. How do I fill out the form? Jane, you fill out the form for 2023 based on what you're budgeting. Okay, so what you would budget, excuse me, you're budgeting for your position, not for the person. And so, you know, my feeling or my thought would be that you're budgeting for a full-time rector for the full year. So you would just, that's how you would complete the form with your full-time, you know, what you're expecting for your full-time compensation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're it's in the budget as if he's not leaving.
Correct. And that's how you should do it on this form. Exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. So now I'm going to go through the rectory not provided. Say it's the same scenario, 5 years of credited service, and say it's the same scenario. So I'll put 40,000 as the last year's compensation here. Take this off. Housing subsidy, say 17,000 was last year.
Well, it would actually have to be at least 18,000 because that's the minimum.
This yeah.
For both years.
Oh, for both years, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll get these out. Say professional expense, 4,000. That's the continuing education of 1,075, and sales for 0 here. You could have other amounts here, of course, but that's the other than where we say what the minimum should be, that should be the minimum at least. You could have a higher amount based on your situation. So if you see that worksheet is filled out, and now on the bottom, you'll see the last line, rectory not provided. This is for 2022. See 40,000 the cash stipend, housing subsidy 18,000, SECA amount, and the pension assessment, housing equity you'll see 0. This is mainly only for the directory provided. And pension the assessment 11,000, professional expense 4,000, continuing education, insurance premium, the total of 117,000 and change for the compensation for 2022. If you look at 2023, okay, 2023, see 42,000 and 42,314. So it will take the higher of the two, and plus the housing subsidy of 18,000, the SECA of 4,000, almost 5,000, pension, professional expense, continuing education, insurance premium that you see with the total of 100 and almost 112,000 in total compensation. So basically, these are the two scenarios you wanted to go through. You may have some uniqueness within your facility, but if you look at these two scenarios, these are the main scenarios we see. Any other questions on the full-time clergy compensation?
I have a question. It doesn't apply to that, but and I'm sure if I read further, I'll find it. But if the clergy decides to participate in the 403B program, whatever percentage they put in, are churches required to do any sort of matching, or we just do it, if we decide to, in case we make that part of the compensation package?
Yeah, again, I'm not aware that there's any matching requirement if clergy are doing a 403B, because the principal pension coverage for clergy is the defined benefit program that we pay into when we pay that 18%. If they decide that they want to have other tax deferred, retirement contributions that they're making out of their own pay, that's fine, but we're not required to match it. If you want to, that you can. I mean, that's something that's negotiable, but there's no requirement. Linda?
Yes. With the rectory, you're asking for the retail value, the fair market value, which I know I can get on Zillow for our rectory. What happens if that's not the amount that we're collecting in rent, that our rent is a lot lower?
Mm-hmm. So I think you've got some real confusion about the rectory. Since you are renting your this has nothing to do with the rental of your rectory.
Okay.
You're renting your rectory to a third party, not a clergy person, correct?
Yes.
You don't need to worry about the rectory at all when it comes to this form. This form is only for clergy compensation.
Oh, okay. So I really don't have to fill any of the rectory stuff out.
No, and if you'll see, like when you're filling out the column, and you'll see it on the part-time when we do that as well, but this example that Gary just gave was for a clergy person where a rectory is not provided. And that's Carmen's situation.
Yes.
Okay. So you see how the boxes, everything there that has to do with the fair rental value of the rectory or the utilities are all grayed out?
Yes.
You could not put an amount in there even if you wanted to. It's blocked.
Oh, okay.
Okay, because it doesn't apply. Just the same way that in the column with rectory provided, okay, you can't put anything in for the housing subsidy because it doesn't apply.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the reason that we separate them that way is to be able to separate those two different situations. Okay. And you are in the situation that's to the far right.
Okay.
That you don't have to worry anything about your rectory.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll go through the part-time compensation. Okay. Go through the part-time. Same way, you can download the part-time worksheet like we did on the same way from the website. And here, same thing, we have three different tabs. Last year, I think, was a little different. This year was much more condensed, and try to make it easier. All the items are in the entry form, and here the key to a couple of key components that you should know on the comp chart and definitions. You see here position categories are active clergy or retired clergy. Active clergy is someone who is below the age of 72, and after the retired clergy is somebody above the age of 72. And you'll see
the other qualification there, though, too. I'm sorry, Gary. Just wanted to interject. Is to active clergy and retired clergy again are based on designations from CPG. So if your clergy person is, even if the clergy person, if he or she is under the age of 72, they could still retire for CPG purposes. And because, all of our compensation worksheets are calculating pensions based on CPG, rules. And if the person is retired for CPG purposes, then they no longer have pension contributions being made for them. So the active and retired, at the age of 72, clergy, there's a mandatory requirement for clergy to retire, subject to, further, if the clergy person wishes to continue, then that's something that they have to, take up with the bishop. So that's for clergy who once they reach age 72, but they can retire for CPG purposes prior to age 72. So if they're 65 and they're retired for CPG purposes, then they would fall under the retired clergy classification in these worksheets.
Thank you, Phyllis, for that.
No problem.
It's important, actually. And here you see, when you look at cash stipend and the minimum, here we talk about per unit, since it's part-time clergy, so per unit. And per unit, those are explained on the bottom, work units actually. And work units are considered, if somebody is working different shift, like say morning, afternoon, or the evening, and you'll see on the line morning, afternoon, or the evening. Usually, they may be working for, each shift could be 2.5 hours to 4 hours. And for a year, that is the 48 hours. And like I said, each unit is 2.5 to 14 hours. 4 hours. And that gives about 12 to 14 work units. And that makes it a full time, the 12 to 14 work units. And like say, if you're looking at 3/4 time position, that's 9 work units. Full time would be around 12 to 14. 3/4 would be 9. Half time position would be 6 work units, and a quarter time would be like 3 work units. And you could have it anywhere in between. Doesn't have to be 9, 12, 9, or 6 and 3. You could have different work units also. And here we're going through a clergy's compensation based on the work units, since they're not working full time. And the credited service is the important factor that plays a role on the stipend minimums. And housing cost is totally negotiable. There is no mandated amount like we have for the full-time clergies. But you could look at the full-time clergy worksheet, for your own to negotiate, so that way you could use that as a guideline for negotiations. Same thing with the Sika. It's based on the work units, same 7.65%. That's to be the employer portion. If it was a lay employee, that would be the same employer portion. So that we give it to the clergy here too. With regard to the assessment, the pension assessment, that is the 18%. That's for the active clergy. You'll see retired clergy, since they're retired, there is no pension assessment going to them. Professional expenses, same thing. 4,500 we thought was the minimum. So divide that by the work units to give them a professional expenses based on the work units. The continuing education, same way divided by 12 to get the per unit, per work unit minimums. Insurance cost is also negotiated in the sense that there is no minimum like we have it on the full time, but you could use the full time chart to as a guideline if you need to provide them insurance for negotiations. So that will give us the total compensation package, and you will see from the entry form and the benefits how this works out. But here are some of the definitions to make it easier, and especially if you're trying to figure out how the calculation is done. Benefit premium worksheet, which is very similar to that what we have on the that's very similar to what we have on the what you saw on the full-time clergy. So here, if you're looking at if you're not providing benefit at all, I'll explain it here, but you could use this to show them actual benefits you're paying here. So this is like I said, we should put in the benefits here, what we're trying to pay for the part-time clergy. So it's say annual rate for life insurance, the same thing, say 228. Okay, it doesn't let me do it to that form, so I'll type in C15. Let's see if it does that. Okay. Total insurance cost. I'll use the same example like before, 2 adults. Here I made a mistake. Fill in the insurance information. So say active clergy. Say here the years of credit service is 4. Cash stipend, say 3,300 last year. $2022. Work unit, say it's part-time, so say 6 hours. Now, 6 work units, I meant, say 2023 the same way, 6 work units. Housing or cost offset. Like we said, there is no requirements, no minimum from our side, but that doesn't mean you cannot provide any part of it. So for now, I'll put in 0. Same way with the fair rental value of the rectory, put in 0, but you could negotiate that. Since it's a part-time, the smaller congregations may want to do this. So a lot of things we didn't have any requirements for the minimums. So like we said, that could be negotiated. Same thing with utilities. Professional expenses, we do have from the 4,500 is what we went for full time. So since it's half time, I'll put in 2250. The 400 last year, 500.
So one of the things here to note, though, I think, because this came up as a part of the conversation in our last clergy compensation worksheet, and we did adjust the worksheet accordingly, as far as I'm aware. For when we come to the professional expenses and the continuing education, what we're looking for in 2022 is your actual expenses. Same way as with the, the full-time worksheet, because for 2022, again, what we're looking to have reported is the actual. And while we have the minimums for the professional expenses and the continuing education, they're also understood to be minimums that apply as a part of a reimbursable program. So the clergy person can ask to be reimbursed for up to $4,500. If they only submit for reimbursement for $500, then your actual expense for that year is $500, which is below the minimum. We understand that. But for the following, for the subsequent year, you still want to budget at the minimum. Okay. So in the case of and we saw that when Gary did the full-time spreadsheet for 2023, he used $4,500 for the professional expenses and $1,075 for the continuing education, because those are our minimums. So what we want to do on this worksheet is exactly the same thing, because the report down below will calculate the proration. So what we would want to do here, Gary, is in the 2023 numbers for those two, I believe, and I want you to check this out for me, we need to put in 4,500 for professional expenses, because I believe the 2023 report will prorate that based on work units, and then 1,075. So let's scroll down to the 2023 report and see if I think that worked. Yes. So you can see down where the professional expenses and continuing education for 2023 have been prorated by the number of work units already. Okay. Whereas the amounts that are in the 2022 compensation report form will reflect the actual amount in each one of those two columns for which your clergy person requested reimbursement under the reimbursable plan.
So I have a question. We have a deacon right now that is being ordained in February. So I'm assuming her salary goes up when she's ordained, correct?
I would have to check on that and see. I think maybe, that might be a situation where maybe we need to have an offline conversation.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Okay. So if it's a retired clergy, like we said, some of the pension amount and other things will change because there is no pension amount. So I'll do the same example for the retired clergy. So you'll see, and if you have any other compensation, you can put that in here too. And if I put all that 0, I think if you don't put it, that's fine too, but whatever amount you have, 0, and that should be and you'll see the retired clergy, the compensation came to 50,000, and here the 2023, with the COLA and other increases, came to 54,000. So any questions on the clergy compensation, full-time or part-time clergy compensation worksheet?
The only other thing I think I just wanted to emphasize, if you could kind of, well, actually scroll down just a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Just to reiterate and maybe emphasize a little bit, just to make sure everybody's clear on this. And if you're not, please feel free to speak up and say so. Is again, when we go back to the concept of how the COLA gets applied, and how that relates to the base stipend based on years of credited service, is just again to reiterate that the COLA only gets applied to the prior year's cash stipend, regardless of whether it's part-time or full-time, same principle. Then that number, which you see here in our example, is $20,790, gets compared to the base stipend based on the years of credited service. So the COLA will never apply to the number for the years of credited service. It's a comparison. It's an either or. It's either the cash stipend plus the COLA, or the base stipend based on years of credited service. Whichever one is higher, that's what this worksheet does, is it compares the two. And in our particular case, we've got the, I believe, because that little arrow is over the the base stipend, but yeah, okay. So our cash stipend with the COLA increase is the higher of the two numbers. So that number is the number that you are required to use as your cash stipend for the coming year. And that's the number that everything else, the SECA, the pension assessment, if it applies, is calculated based on that number. And so I just want to make sure that everybody's clear with that, or if you do have any questions, now's the time. Everybody good? Okie doke. Very good.
I thank you for participating in the session. And if you have any other questions still, you can always call me or Phyllis. And I thank John Sturgis for spearheading the Standing Commission on Clerical Compensation, and be instrumental in making the changes, and for his leadership also. And I thank Phyllis for working hard on this worksheet and making it much more streamlined for our congregations. Thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you, John. So much for doing this workshop.
Could you give me the web address
for
yes.
the diocese?
The diocese, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just www.dioceseofnj.org.
Okay, fine.
And then within that, you ask for financial resources, and then within that, you'll see the compensation.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Yep. And if you have, any other questions or need to be directed in any other way, I am going to throw Gary right under the bus by posting his email address in the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to use it and let him know. Or if you need to, if you still are having trouble accessing the worksheet, or have any difficulties that way, please feel free to reach out to him. He'll be happy to
I
help
just
you.
have a question. I just have one question because I am a new treasurer as well. Is there any way I could find out what that minimum for a part-time clergy would have been? Is there like in 2022?
The minimum for part-time clergy would depend upon the years accredited service.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's
I have a quick question. Quick question.
Sure. Go ahead, John.
It's more of a statement, and I am sure it applies to everyone. But last year, COLA was, I think, 4.5. This year is 5%. You know, I don't know what the other parishes in the diocese are experiencing, but we are St. Mark's and Plainfield. We haven't recovered from COVID in terms of giving, people coming back to church, either in person and or handing in envelopes. You know, so our income at best is stable. It's I haven't completed the numbers for 2023 yet, but they sure are not increasing by 5%. Well, so Mike, in looking at my experience with what I used to do for a living as a banker, you know, this doesn't seem to be a good business model. I mean, obviously the church isn't a business as such, but how do we continue doing this? I mean, if for instance, if we have a budget that's bare minimum, and salaries are increasing 4 and 5% per year, and incomes are stagnant, I mean, that must be affecting all of us. I mean, it's nothing. It's not something we can answer at this in this get together. But I mean, it's something to think about. I mean,
it's unsustainable. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, and I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know how the salaries. One of the persons at St. Mark's is on the committee. I complain to him all the time, but it's not a good business model. I mean, in my
if we were growing at 5% a year, we wouldn't have a problem, but we're not.
Right.
Right. Well, I would just say in response, and I'm happy to, after I finish, hear from either John or Gary or both. I know when the Standing Commission on Clerical Compensation meets, there are, this is definitely something that we take into consideration. This, as you noted, John, you've got somebody on that committee. And so that committee has representation from churches all across our, diocesan demographics. And we have some really robust conversation about all of this. I mean, the Social Security Administration, as well as CPG at this point, I just got notified yesterday, I saw an email, their cost of living adjustments were over 8.5%. And that's not just because they're saying, oh, let's just jack everything up by 8.5%. It's in response to costs that people have to absorb. And so our clergy, in order for us to be able to, continue to provide livable wages for our clergy, we do need to pay attention to that. And we did sort of mitigate that in not giving an 8.5+% increase. But we have to recognize that our clergy have to live. And, and I think that one of the things I'll just sort of, say quickly from the other sphere of what my role is here in the Diocese of New Jersey is working together with congregations and especially with vestries, because we recognize that everyone is struggling. Everyone at some level is struggling. Through COVID especially, but even before COVID, we were struggling. And we have to start to think, it's a much larger question that, as you quite accurately noted, we're not going to, even come close to being able to, to touch on this particular meeting. But, we consistently have to be asking ourselves, what do we need to do differently in order to respond to what's going on around us? And there are a number of different answers to that question. As Isabel, as I'm not sorry, not Isabel, Ingrid noted, in her particular situation, Pemberton and Lumberton have affiliated, in order to help them manage their ministries in the face of exactly what we're talking about here. That's not going to be the answer for everybody, and I'm not saying that it is, but it's a creative solution to an adaptive problem, and so as we move forward, we're going to have to continue to try to find those creative solutions, because you're right that what we're looking at, if you just look at it from that very limited focused perspective, it's not sustainable. So what are we going to do differently in order to change the sustainability of the model within which we're working? We can't just put all of it on the backs of our employees, be they clergy or lay. So that's, that would be my response. But I would welcome also, anything that either Gary or John might have to add to that.
I would just say from the Clerical Compensation Commission, we really worked over this question. We did look at so many different ways that compensation is being adjusted throughout society. And so this is a very low number relative to what inflation has caused, but we again have got to be sure we don't make the cleric at each congregation absorb the cost expenses that are going on in the and the reduction in contributions in each congregation.
Go ahead.
I would only add to that, however, many of the clergy are living in parish provided housing, and much of the components of inflation have been housing and rent related, and that housing cost has not gone up. So that has not been a component of inflation that has particularly affected many of the clergy.
I would say, I hear you when you're saying that, Larry, but I think it might surprise you to know how that demographic has been changing. We don't have nearly as many people in church provided housing as we used to.
And I'm sure you studied that and took that into account. So thank you.
We did. We tried to, again, we're it's all imperfect, but we really did try to come to a balance, in the number that we finally came to.
But again, thank you for your input.
Any other questions? Well, we really, again, thank you so much for your presence with us here today, for taking the time to go through this with us. As I've said, we remain open to any other questions you might have as you're actually going through this after, the year end, in order to get the reports in. And we're here for you and appreciate every part of the conversation that went on, that we were part of today, and all of the points that have been brought up. And rest assured that we will take them back with us and continue to, as we continue to think things through in the future. So thank you all very much, and have a wonderful rest of your Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank
Blessed
you.
Advent.
Working on
Same to
budget
you.
today.
God bless you.
Yay! It's such a fun Saturday.
Yeah, there you go. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yes, Merry Christmas.